Hi everyone and Happy New Year! I'm Rosemary and welcome to my ranking of the top 25 Dollar Tree DIY home decor projects I've done up to 2023. I thought it would be fun to do a little retrospective as we begin this new year and share how I would rank the home decor pieces I've done on this channel over the past 3 years or so. Megan over at Glue Guns and Roses did a similar ranking for her Christmas DIYs that she has done over the years, and I thought it was just brilliant, and so I decided to copy that concept, but in this video I'll be doing non-seasonal everyday decor items instead. And it will just be Dollar Tree home decor DIYs, so I'm not including any organization pieces or gift ideas or thrift flips or holiday decor, just year-round decor made mostly with Dollar Tree items. As you watch the video, please let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree with the rankings, and if I left one of your favorites off the list, or if there's some that made the list that had no business being on there. Let's get started with what I ranked at number 25. Coming in at number 25 is the large wicker basket I made from a Dollar Tree laundry basket, a hula skirt, and some Dollar Tree raffia. I love this basket, and it has seen plenty of action over the 2.5 years or so since I made it. I would rank it much higher on this countdown if it weren't for the fact that it was a very time-consuming project. If you're familiar with the channel, you know that the FABED in Fab Tax stands for fast, affordable, beautiful, easy, and delicious. And though not edible, it is quite delicious on the eyes. There were no difficult techniques involved, so it is rather easy to make, and I think, in my opinion, it certainly does hit that beautiful standard, and at just a few dollars all in, it is certainly affordable. But the F for fast? Nope, fast it is not. To make, I untied the strands from the waistband of the skirt. Then, starting at the bottom of the basket, I wrapped the strands, gluing them on as I went. I did the same around the top underside of the basket. Next, I took strands of the hula skirt and glued them on each of the vertical pieces coming down from the top to the bottom of the basket. Like I said, very easy, but also very time consuming. But if you're just sitting there watching a show, it does go pretty quick. And then once all the vertical strips were done, I then switched over to the horizontal strips, again covering each with a glued on strand of the hula skirt. And then, ouch, yes, it's true, I did all of the vertical and horizontal strips on the inside of the basket, again covering them with a strand of the hula skirt. And yes, this is time consuming, not exactly tedious, but it is also kind of relaxing. It's kind of like knitting or something, you know, you're just kind of doing a repetitive action. So it does go pretty quickly. Again, if you're preoccupied watching a show or something like that, it does go pretty fast. And then once all of the interior and exterior strips were covered with the hula skirt, it was time to do some basket weaving. And then for this, I did switch over to the raffia, and what I did was tied it onto one of the basket strips and then began weaving the raffia in and out of the strips. If you want to make this project, it is something you probably do want to do over the course of several sessions, maybe picking it up every night or two to do a little bit more of the project. Once I completed the first row of raffia, I started weaving the second row, this time weaving in and out of alternate strips on the basket. And then when I got to the end of one strand of the raffia, I just took another strand and tied the two ends together and just kept on going. Once I completed that top section of the basket horizontally, I decided to go vertical on the next section. So I again tied one of the strands of the raffia to a section of the basket and then began weaving vertically down the basket, this time incorporating 2 of the rows as I went. And I did this all the way around the basket. I am just giving a quick overview here, but if you would like to see more detailed instructions, please check out the original video, which I will link in the description. For the bottom section of the basket, I again did a horizontal weave like I did on the top section, and I did leave the bottom of the basket without any raffia or hula since that would get scraped and pulled up, so I just left that with the plastic on the bottom. To finish off the top rim of the basket, I again went back to the hula skirt, this time wrapping around the rim of the basket, gluing a piece on and then just wrapping it all the way around and adding a new piece of hula when I got to the end of a strand just by gluing it right on to where it was and continuing to wrap. Next, I decided to add a little color with some caramel colored spray paint. 1, to warm up the stark white at the bottom of the basket, and 2, to also warm up the color of the natural raffia and hula. I applied the spray paint very lightly with short, gentle bursts, slowly building up the color to the desired finish. And then it was finished. A little time consuming, but well worth the effort. And like I mentioned, I've been using it now on a daily basis for about 2.5 years, and it has held up perfectly. Coming in at number 24 is the coffee sign Magnolia dupe, which was one of the first Dollar Tree DIY dupes I did back in July of 2019. And I took on this coffee shelf sitter from Magnolia. For the base, I used a square dowel from Lowe's and then measured out the spacing for the letters. After marking the appropriate spots, I took 2-inch flathead screws and, using a combination of hot glue and E6000, glued them to the marked spaces on the square dowel. To make the letters, I used Dollar Tree paper straws. For the long vertical sides of the letters, I kept the straws whole, and then to create the horizontal sides of the letters, I cut 3-inch or 2.5-inch pieces, then used hot glue to assemble the letters. When making the E's and F's, I made sure that the cross pieces were lined up so that the letters were even. To attach the letters, I covered the screws in caulk and then slid the ends of the letters onto the screws. The bottom sections of the C, O, and E were glued directly to the wood dowel. Then the entire piece was painted with black spray paint. And the result is a fun little coffee sign, not too far from the original at a fraction of the cost. Coming in at number 23 is one of my all-time faves, the wood lantern. This lantern is actually inspired by the lanterns at Pottery Barn, and although lanterns are really kind of overdone, I wanted to include this one in the list because, to my knowledge, it's the first to ever use handles or dowels as risers, since jangle blocks and picture frames were kind of all the rage at the time back in early October 2019 when this video was first published. The second reason I really like this DIY and video is because I give a kind of method to the madness, not only suggesting multiple riser ideas like the previously mentioned handles and dowels, but also all kinds of options for lantern toppers, as well as lantern feet, but also the base and lids that can be used for this type of lantern. And they're super easy to make. Just grab a base and lid of your choice as long as they're the same size. These Dollar Tree square wall hangings are a good option. Choose your risers depending on how tall you want your lantern to be. These wood dowels from Walmart make a good option for a medium-sized lantern. Using the handles from Dollar Tree plungers will create an extra tall, dramatic-looking lantern. If you want your lantern to have feet, you can glue them on to the base. I'll be using some Dollar Tree dice here to act as the feet for my lantern. Next, I flip the base over and glue the risers to the inside corners of the base using a combination of both E6000 and hot glue. For the lid, I'll take the second wall hanging and glue one of the plunger heads to the top. I'll then take a Dollar Tree shower curtain ring and snip off the tab in between, then glue the shower ring to the top of the plunger head. You can then paint the lanterns in the color of your choice and play with the different base and lid and riser and topper options to create a multitude of different styles. Coming in at number 22 is the white patio table with planter. I love this table and it fit my needs perfectly for several years, providing the perfect end table for my patio deck. It was also just the perfect size and provided space underneath for storage or a plant. It was actually a dupe of a Kirklands item I had seen, but I wanted something smaller and more affordable. To make, I took a medium-sized Dollar Tree basket and, using wire cutters, removed the top rim. Next, I flipped the basket upside down and glued a tin can to the underside to support the weight of the basket. Next, I took 4 of the large 5-gallon paint sticks that I picked up at Lowe's and zip-tied those to the sides of the basket. I zip-tied the first along the side and then zip-tied the second directly across from the first. From there, I zip-tied a third in between the first and the second, and then the fourth went directly across from the third. As for the rim of the basket that I cut off earlier, I sanded that down along with a pizza pan from Dollar Tree and painted them both with white chalk paint. Next, I'm going to use some E6000 glue to attach the two pieces together. At first, I thought it would look neat if I left the ends of the basket untrimmed, but then decided to go ahead and cut all of those little ends off. Next, I glued the tabletop on with some E6000 glue, then weighted it down with candles to get a nice tight bond. And then all that was needed was a beautiful plant in the bottom, and coming in at the time at just about $4, it was a much better bargain than the $69 at Kirklands. Coming in at number 21 is the Black Bucket Planter, and if you noticed from the previous DIY, it was on the deck right next to the white table. And this great little planter is also a Kirklands dupe. To make, I took 3 of the Dollar Tree wire brushes and carefully removed the wire bristles from the wood handles with pliers. Next, I drilled holes into the handles for the screws to attach to the bucket. Since this was going to be an outdoor planter, I painted the wood with some triple thick polyurethane. I then lined up the handles on the bucket and drilled through the holes to create the hole in the bucket. Then, using flat screws with nuts, I placed the screw through the hole and attached the nut on the other side. A gorgeous planter I have used indoors and out for years now. I really did get quite a bargain for my $4. Before we get into the top 20, I wanted to do my first honorable mention, and that would be for the Pottery Barn dupe vessel. I didn't want to include it on the main list since vessels have been so overdone, but I thought it at least does deserve an honorable mention. For this dupe, I picked up a vase from the Dollar Tree that's a very similar shape as the one from Pottery Barn, but of course, since it's from Dollar Tree, it is a much smaller size. However, this technique would be helpful to see how I did it, and you can pick up a larger vase at a thrift store, or maybe you have one at home and can use it to create one on the scale of the Pottery Barn vase. So I'm starting with a base coat of this terracotta spackle paint, where I mixed 1 part of terracotta craft paint and 1 part of Dollar Tree spackle. And that first coat is somewhat sheer in places, but it will be built up over time, and it is already giving me some good texture. So after letting that first coat dry, I did go ahead and apply a second and then a third coat of the terracotta spackle paint. And then once all of the 3 coats were dry, I did take a piece of sandpaper and go over some of the edges and ridges and smooth it out. Next, I took some Waverly chalk paint in the color Cashew that I had diluted down a little bit with some water and then sponged it over the surface of my terracotta painted vase. Sponging on with the diluted Cashew color paint allows for the terracotta base to still poke through. And I'll continue doing that until the surface of my vase is covered. Next, I'm going to take my Waverly chalk paint in the color Hazelnut and again dilute it with some water and then sponge it on, allowing for the other layers of terracotta and cashew to poke through again. And then once that's done, I'm going to go back and just accent with a dark brown and a deep red color to get the different demarcations that were on the original piece. I'm also going to go with some white paint and just give it a nice splatter. I'll then repeat the toothbrush splatter technique with the dark brown paint. And then the result is a pretty close dupe, at least where the finish is concerned. Now back to the countdown with number 20 and a puck light hanging pendant. For this one, I used 4 of the Dollar Tree hanging planters and also 2 of the Dollar Tree puck lights that I painted black with some chalk paint. To give my pendant a little more substance and weight, I zip tied 2 of the planters together on each side and then snipped off the zip ties and used E6000 glue to attach the puck light to the center of the baskets. And I did this for both sets. Next, I took the chain and reattached it to the top of the pendant. Then I took the 2 sides and zip tied them together. I can still turn the puck lights on and off through the grates. However, in order to change the batteries, I will need to cut and replace the zip ties. The result is a quick, easy, and cheap lighting solution where I had no easy access to electricity. In addition, it looks great, and the puck lights give off a surprising amount of light. Number 19 is a Peruvian mirror dupe and is a great option indoors or out. This one is another dupe from a high-end store, this time West Elm. For this one, I used a Dollar Tree mirror, some Dollar Tree erasers, and a package of small round mirrors from Michaels. First, I popped off the back of the mirror, then using a ruler, I marked 12, 6, 3, and 9 as if it were on a clock. I then placed one of the erasers at each of those spots, and then this created a little segment where I could place the other erasers and easily get equal spacing. I did this all the way around the mirror and then used a white paint marker to mark the center of each eraser and where it fell on the rim of the mirror. And then using a combination of hot glue and E6000, I attached the erasers to the mirror frame. I then reinforced with some more E6000. Once the glue was dry, I spray painted the eraser and frame combo with some Krylon paint in brilliant gold. Next, I attached the mini craft mirrors to each of the erasers, again with some E6000 glue, and then replaced the mirror back into the frame. Not a bad dupe for about $6. Number 19, a front door floral in a bucket, is one of my personal favorites. This one is simple and sweet, and I wanted to use a Cascade gel pack container to do this project, but then I remembered that I had purchased this bucket from a end of season clearance the year before, so I went ahead and used that. And all I'm going to do is take these Dollar Tree florals. There's two different kinds, two different stems, but they're both in a nice bright white, and I'm simply going to add them to the bucket and then use some of this beautiful black and white bold striped ribbon to create a hanger and a bow for these flowers. I cut a long piece of the ribbon and then tied each of the ends to the handle on the bucket. To keep the flowers arranged when opening and closing the door, as well as keeping them safe from strong winds, I did add some floral foam to the bottom of the bucket and then place the stems into the foam. And again, nothing really special here, no great trick or hack. It's just simply these Dollar Tree stems in a bucket tied with a ribbon hanging on a door. But I just wanted to include it here because it literally is one of my very most favorite things I've ever done with Dollar Tree items. And it just goes to show you that sometimes you can get a whole lot of wow with very little effort or expense. Number 17, the scroll Notepad, is a fun one and is yet another Magnolia dupe. I just thought this was the cutest thing when I saw it on the Magnolia website and knew I just had to make one, of course, from Dollar Tree items. So I started with this wall mount hook rack and removed all but the two hooks on the ends of the rack. I then took some Dollar Tree mouse traps and removed all of the wire pieces and clamps, leaving just the wood behind. I then attached the wood planks to the wire rack using a combination of both E6000 and hot glue. The hot glue just helps to hold the wood planks in place while the E6000 sets up. Once all the planks were in place, I reinforced the back with some craft sticks. For the pole, I'm going to use the handle from a Dollar Tree plunger, and then for the finials, I'm going to use some of these table tennis balls. I made an X in the ball with a utility knife and then used some scissors to cut the hole out larger to fit the end of the pole. In addition, I'm going to be using some of these Dollar Tree magnetic clips, and I'm going to take all the pieces outside and paint them with this metallic farmhouse black paint. And then once painted, I'm going to further accent with some of this brown craft paint, and I'm going to be applying it with almost like a dry sponge. And this way it just kind of gives that effect that I'm looking for. And then I'm also going to be using some of that yellow paint to kind of brighten and wear out some of the spots the way it is on the original piece. And I'll do this for all of the pieces. For the roll of paper, I'm going to use a roll of Dollar Tree craft paper that I'm going to measure and then cut down to size using a Dollar Tree small saw. And then all you have to do is slide the paper roll onto the pole and then place the pole onto the hooks. Unroll the scroll and clip the metal clips onto the bottom of the paper. And then here are the two together. Not an exact match, but pretty close. Up next at number 16 is my macrame hanging planter. Okay, so it's not macrame. It's more like a macrame look planter. And to make, I use one of the Dollar Tree gold metal baskets and a Dollar Tree mop head. The first thing I needed to do was to remove some sections of the wire on the basket to make space for my macrame-ish designs. So on the side of the basket, I clipped off a section of the wire using wire clippers. Then it was time to make my highly intricate macrame design of crossing two of the mop strands and tying a knot. I then centered and secured that fabulous design in the section of the basket where I had removed the wire, and I secured the four ends to the four corners on the basket. I then took another mop strand and attached it at the top right corner with some hot glue, then began wrapping the strand around the wire adjoining the X design section. I then continued to wrap all the wires with the mop strands, and when I get to the end of a strand, I just add some hot glue and attach the two pieces together and continue wrapping. Then once all the sides were wrapped, I also wrapped the top rim of the basket. To make a hanger for the basket, I tied on 3 mop strands and added a little glue to the ends to stop the strands from fraying. I then braided the strands and attached 3 more sections the same way. Once I had the 4 braided sections complete, I added some glue to the ends and then added a double looped mop strand to the top. I then took yet another piece of mop strand and wrapped it around the loop and the braided ends. It's a little messy, but it works really well to bring all these pieces together and create a loop to act as the hanger. And then that's it. It's ready to hang and add a plant, although in retrospect, I think it could really use a cute little tassel there attached to the bottom. Up next at number 15 is the rope large wall hanging. This piece again is a dupe from West Elm, and my daughter, she just loved it and she wanted something like this for her apartment, so I set about making it, of course, from Dollar Tree items. I started with a piece of Dollar Tree foam board measuring 26 by 19 inches. I then used a hula hoop as the template to create the arch. Once I traced the arch with a pencil, I used scissors to cut it out. Then it was time to start gluing on the rope. And I'll be using this white nautical rope from Dollar Tree. However, I want to point out that it does come in 2 different gauges. There is one that is thicker and shorter, and the other is thinner but longer. I'll be using the thinner rope that measures 11 feet in length. I start by getting the middle point of the rope, making sure that the ends are even. I then lay it flat on my surface, add the glue, and begin adding that first row of rope. And then from there, I repeat the process, making sure that the rope is even before I apply it, and then adding 9 more rows for a total of 10 rows. At this stage, I needed to give the glue some time to rest and set up, so I will wait for that glue to dry and then cut it out with some scissors. And then when I did cut it out, I wanted to get as close as possible to the rope, but then I found that if I went too close, I was cutting the rope itself, so I decided to go a little further out and then just go back and clean that up with a utility knife. I'll then use the cut piece of foam board for the inside arch, and I used a platter in order to create that template. And then once that piece of foam board was cut out, I repeated the process of gluing on the rope, again making sure that my ends were even before applying, and then starting at the outside row and working in. And I added a total of 9 rows this time. Next, I again gave the glue time to set up, and then once dry, I cut out the middle piece with scissors, then went back with a utility knife to make the more precise cut. For the cross pieces, I'll be using some balsa wood, which is pretty inexpensive and you can pick up at any of the craft stores. It's really nice to work with since you get that great wood look while having the ease of being able to cut it with scissors. So I was easily able to cut my piece in half lengthwise and then just laid one of those halves on a flat surface and covered it with glue. Next, I laid my rope covered pieces on the top and then centered that on the wood. Next, I took the other half of the wood, again covering it with glue and placing it face down on top of my rope pieces. To get a tight bond, I secured all the pieces together with some twine that I wrapped around the wood until the glue was set. While the glue on the wood pieces was drying, my daughter Nikki separated the strands of rope for all of the rope that falls beneath where the wood slats are. To attach the piece to the wall, we chose to use finishing nails. We put the nails directly into the rope on both the smaller and larger piece of the wall hanging, and then tap them right into the wall using a hammer. Once the piece was hung, we took some scissors and cut along the bottom to create a nice even edge. And then that's it. I just love how this piece came out, and it has become one of our favorites over the years. And now moving on to number 14, the wood ladder. This piece actually began life as a Look for Less DIY planner dupe that had this Kirklands piece as an inspiration. I added my own little sentiment there with the bloom where you are planted signs on each of the planters, and this did have at least one season as the planter, but soon after it got co-opted into a multitude of different displays and backgrounds until it found a home to store throws in my family room. And I just love it there. So that is pretty much where it's going to stay. Since I was making the planter in the original project, the original video has information on making the plant hangers and signs, but I will just be focusing on the ladder in this video. But if you'd like to see the full tutorial, I'll link the original video as well as all the original video from all of the DIYs featured in this countdown in the description for more in-depth instruction. But for the ladder, I used 2 6-foot by 2-inch pine boards from Lowe's, and I also picked up 2 packs of large painter sticks while I was there. To make, I cut the tops off of the painter sticks using my saw and miter box, and then stained the sticks with wood stain. I then measured in 1 inch from each side to mark where I had to make my drill holes. I then used my drill to make the holes. To assemble the ladder, I measured up from the bottom 4 inches and marked the pine board at that spot. I did that on each side and then lined up one of the paint sticks with the machine cut edge of the paint stick lining up with the edge of the pine board. I then attached the 2 pieces together using a screw. Next, I took a 12-inch ruler and placed it above the paint stick on the pine board, and that let me know where I needed to add my next paint stick. I again lined up the machine cut edge, meaning the edge that was existing on the paint stick and not the one that I cut to remove the paint stick handle. And then once that second paint stick was in place, I again attached it to the pine board with a screw. And I repeat this process for a total of 5 of the paint sticks. To attach the paint sticks to the other pine board, I started again at the bottom at that 4-inch up mark and then lined the paint stick up along that line. From there, I again placed the ruler on the board and used that as my square to attach the ascending slats. Please note that the edges on this side of the ladder will probably not line up with the edges of the pine board since these hand-cut pieces will have variations. But as long as you are squaring with the ruler, you'll have straight slats. Just attach where the hole falls, even though the slat is short of the pine board edge, as this will be the back of the ladder and you won't see it. And then your ladder is ready to use to hang pots, use in seasonal displays, or my favorite, hold and display comfy cozy throws. Speaking of comfy and cozy, I just love number 13, a quick and easy sweater pillow. For me, nothing says cozy quite like a sweater pillow. The textures and colors are fabulous and can be mixed and matched with your existing pieces. There's really nothing not to love except maybe for the exorbitant prices of these pillows at the stores. So that's my cue to DIY. I decided to use this shoulderless cable knit turtleneck sweater, which at the time seemed like a good idea, but in practical use, if it's cold enough to wear a turtleneck, you're usually not pulling out that shoulderless one. So it never did get much use, and I think it will have a much fuller life as a sweater pillow. To start, I laid the sweater out on a flat surface, making sure it was even and cut right under the arms. Next, I turned it inside out, again smoothing it out on a flat surface, making sure the sides were even. From here, I'm again going to use the Stitch Witchery Fusion tape to join the cut end together. Once the tape is in place, I'll add a damp cloth over top of a section and then place a hot iron on top of that, holding it in place for 10 seconds. And then repeating this down the length of the seam. And then here you can see how the Stitch Witchery does a really nice job mending those two sides together, even on this heavy sweater fabric. And from this point, I do have a couple of options. I could continue to keep the sweater inside out and just do the Stitch Witchery again, but leave a little gap there to stuff, and then either hand sew or I can still do it with the Stitch Witchery as well there on the end where I was stuffing. But I'm going to go ahead and flip this inside out, or back, the right side back actually. And I'm going to keep, I like the way the ribbing is there at the bottom, so I want to kind of keep that as intact as possible. And so I'm going to do the Stitch Witchery with the sweater turned back outside again, and just go ahead and keep as much of that preserved as possible. But before I fused the two sides together, I took an older bed pillow that I had on hand and used that for the stuffing. I decided to go this route instead of just plain stuffing because I needed the liner of the bed pillow, since you can see through the knit weave of the sweater. As mentioned in the Dollar Tree no-sew pillow video, I prefer to use a hair straightening iron as opposed to a regular clothes iron when doing this type of seal. And as you can see, it creates just as good a bond as the regular iron. However, I did not show here that you do still need to use the wet cloth or the damp cloth to get the best result. And then here you can see the finished project. I'm not so sure I would finish this the same way again. The thicker material did create a little ruffling that I'm not exactly fond of, but I still think it came out pretty well. Probably would hand stitch the next time. And then I just love how adding the sweater pillow instantly gives the space a warm and cozy feel. Another way to warm up a space would be to add some sun with number 12, a Sunburst Mirror. And this was another dollar dupe from a not so high-end but still very stylish store, H&M. For this project, I'm going to be using some of the Dollar Tree glow sticks. I'm going to be using both bracelets and necklaces, so I need 1 pack of each. I'll use 3 from each of the packets. And then I went ahead and just bent them around as if I was using them for glow sticks. And of course, they will light up. You can't really see it here. But of course, as you know, that glow goes away probably in an hour or 2. And then what I want to do is take those 3 bracelets and use the connectors to connect the 3 together in a circle. Next, I took 2 of the necklaces, bent those around, and formed those into a larger circle. And then with that 3rd necklace, I just connected it to itself to create 1 smaller circle. Then I took some masking tape and just reinforced around the connectors. And then to give my glow stick hoops a bit of a rattan finish, I went ahead with a hula skirt from the Dollar Tree and cut off the strands. And then I'm going to just wrap the hoops with the hula skirt. I want to keep saying hula hoop, but I want to wrap the glow stick hoops with the hula skirt strands. There we go. And then I'm just using some of my Titebond glue to adhere it. You can use any glue here. I'm just using that one because I will need it in other parts of this project. So I just figured I'd use that one. And then this is what they look like after I did wrap these 3 times. That is a little bit labor intensive, but I wanted to give it a nice finish. And then I just took some of this Territorial Beige craft paint and added a little water to it to create a stain for the hoops. And I'm going to be staining the largest hoop and the second to largest hoop. I'm not going to be staining that small hoop. I did put that one aside. And then once the stain was dry, I took the larger hoop and set that aside. And then with the smaller hoop, what I want to do is attach some more of the hula strands to this smaller hoop. And so what I did was I cut 6-inch strands of the hula skirt, and then I'm just folding it in half. And then what I did was add some dabs of glue there to the hoop. And I'm kind of just spacing the dabs of glue approximately 1 width of the hula skirt strand. So I'm just kind of eyeballing it. You can measure it if you want a more exact finish. And then once all the strands were attached, I took the smallest hoop, the one that I didn't stain, the one that was the one necklace joined together, and I placed that inside of the hoop with the strands glued to it. And so it fits really nicely right inside. And then when you flip it over, you can see that the strands actually come out now between the 2 hoops. And that's the way you want it for the next step. For the mirror, I'm going to be using this mirror from the Dollar Tree. Now, I did want to point out that this is the newer mirror that they now carry in the stores, and it is a little bit larger than the ones that they've had in the past. So just want to point that out. And then to glue the hoops to the mirror, I am going to be placing that part where I glued the strands to the hoops down, so that that's the part that touches the mirror. And then I'm using Titebond glue here, but you could also use E6000. What I like about the Titebond is that it does have a pretty good setup within 15 seconds. And so what I'm doing here is just kind of maneuvering it and positioning it to make sure that while it is in that setup phase, that it is kind of keeping the shape properly. And then once that piece was set, I took the larger hoop and placed it so that it was about 3 inches away from the center piece all the way around. Next, I took the strands, and where each strand was, I added again a dab of glue there to the top on the outer hoop. And you can see where I already did have some dabs of glue and had applied these sticks. These are the craft sticks that you get from the Dollar Tree. And I did get 2 packs of these. And then what I did was I did it backwards. And so I had to pull all of the little sticks off. And so that's why you see those little kind of marks there where I had to pull the glue off. You also see on the sticks themselves, they have some of the paint where it got pulled off of the hoop. So anyway, I'm just gluing the 2 pieces together with the sticks. And I kind of did it where I tried to do it on the hoop, and then I did it on the stick. And either way, it's kind of, 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, whichever way you want to do it. But just glue the 2 pieces together with the sticks. And then I just wanted to point out that as I was doing this, I was measuring to make sure that there was that 3-inch difference between the hoops. And then at that point, I did leave the whole piece in place overnight to make sure that I could get a nice strong bond so I could pick it up and do this with it, since I would have to handle it quite a bit in the next steps. And so next what I did was I took the strands that were at the bottom of each one of the sticks and wrapped it around and glued it there on the back to create that kind of crisscross rattan weave. And so what I'm doing with the hula skirt is wrapping it around, twisting it around so that it kind of creates a smaller or thinner strand. And then I'm going to just add a little bit of my glue and then again just crisscross the 2 pieces. I do kind of want to wrap it around the bottom of the pole so that the pole is sticking out a little bit, and then that can just get wrapped around to the back and glued to the back of the mirror. Also, I did remove the hanger from the original mirror. It just is on with a little screw, so I just unscrewed that screw, and then I'm going to attach it to the back of this mirror with some E6000 glue. And then to create that rattan weave again around the top hoop, I just took another strand of the hula skirt, twisted it around to create that thinner strand, and then crisscrossed it across the two pieces, the stick and the hoop, and just glued it there to the back. And then here you can see once the rattan weave has been applied to the outer loop. I also wanted to point out that the original does have a rattan hanger that can be made by joining two of the bracelets together and then wrapping it. I didn't want to use that one. I think it looks better without it, so I'm just going to go ahead and use the Dollar Tree hanger. And now here you can see the finished project next to the original. And as you can see, the dollar dupe is actually larger than the original. That's not typical. Usually we come in smaller, but this does come out larger by about a good 4 inches. So that's pretty good, and at quite a savings for just about $7. Okay, that one was a little intense. So let's change it up with number 11, a copper cage hanging planter. This one is similar to the hanging pendant lamp. However, I'll just be using 3 of the Dollar Tree hanging baskets with this one. I'm going to remove the chains, and then I'm going to take 2 of the baskets and zip tie them together for the bottom portion of this hanging basket. And then I'll just snip the tails from those zip ties. For the insert, I'll be using the bowl part of a food storage container, and then I will spray paint the outside of that as well as the metal baskets and one of the chains with this aged copper spray paint. And you can see how nice they come up once sprayed with the spray paint, and how it will assemble is the double basket will be on the bottom of the hanger with the food storage bowl sitting inside of that, and then the single wire basket will be on top of that, and I will hook on the hanging chain right there in the middle. But before adding the top, I will put a plant in the container and then zip tie the top and bottom together. I will still be able to water and care for the plant through the cage, but if I wanted to change out the plant, I will need to cut and replace the zip ties. A little bit of an annoyance, but at just about $6, not much of a price to pay compared to what it would cost to purchase a similar type planter at a retail store. And now, before heading into the top 10, I'd like to once again do an honorable mention for this texture pillow with tassels. This is another dupe from the retailer H&M, and although it is basically a Dollar Tree rug pillow, it came out so close to the original that I felt it was at least worth an honorable mention. Typically, I tend to shy away from projects for this channel unless they are unique in the offering or in some way bring an innovative material, method, or technique. And for the Dollar Tree rug pillow, I believe hands down, those kudos again go to Megan over at Glue Guns and Roses, that little trailblazer. But sometimes I make exceptions, always with credit, and this pillow has been one of those times. In this version, what I'm going to be doing is cutting out that middle piece on both of the rugs. So I'm going to just start there and use that middle section as a guide and just take my scissors and cut right up along the side of that middle piece all the way through to the other end. And I'll do that on the other side as well. I'll do that for both rugs, and then I'll set that middle piece aside. Next, I'll take both ends on both rugs and flip them back to the shaggy side, and then apply some hot glue there to the middle. This is going to be the inside of the pillow, and this is what the outside of the pillow will look like when we get there. But first, I want to go back and go ahead and do the shaggy parts of the rug. I'm going to do that on both the top and the bottom and for both of the rugs. Next, I went back to the center pieces that I had put aside previously, and I'm just going to cut out this middle rectangle. And this is also, though, where I wish I had a DeLorean and a flux capacitor so I could build a time machine and go back in time so that I could cut this width down by about 1.5 inches. We'll see that in a minute. But what I'm doing here is actually removing some of the underneath of the rug where the two pieces butt together. And that's just giving me a nice smoother joint there between the two pieces. Then I went and took the other little pieces that were on the ends and cut those down as well. That gave me 4 pieces on the ends, and I'm going to just use those for the backs of the pillows. So from those center pieces, I got those 4 little pieces and the 2 wider pieces up top. Next, I'm going to join the two pillows together, again using hot glue. And this stuff, I don't know what the fiber is that makes up these Dollar Tree rugs, but hot glue literally fuses these two things together unbelievably. So you cannot separate the two after hot glue has been applied to these fibers. So I know this to be a fact, as a matter of fact, which we'll find out shortly. But in any event, right now, all I'm doing is just hot gluing the ends together, and they do have a nice finished edge. So that's given me a great, easy way to just create a nice finished edge on the pillow. I will leave that one side open, and so I can stuff it later on. But before I go ahead and do that, I am going to apply my way too wide middle pieces to the pillow, and again with some hot glue, which I wish I didn't do now because I didn't realize it was too wide until later. But in any event, I went ahead and applied this middle piece and did the hot glue there to the middle, along the edges, all the way around. And then once those shaggy bits were attached, it was time to stuff. And what I'm using here is actually from an old comforter. I made all of my daughter's dorm pillows, which was about 7 or 8 from that comforter, and I still have left over. And so that's what I'm using here to stuff this pillow. So definitely don't throw out any old comforters or pillows. You can always use them for projects like this in the future. And then simple and easy little hot glue there on the end to close it up. Next, it was time to make the tassels, and the tassels on the original are really thick. I think that's one of the neat features about it. It has a really thick band there at the top as well. And so to make the tassels, I'm going to use some of this yarn from the Dollar Tree. This is in the color crepe, which matches the rug really well. And what I want to do is cut one small little piece, and that is a 3-inch piece of cardboard that I've cut there out of a box. And then that piece just goes there along the top horizontally. And then I will wrap the ribbon, the yarn around the cardboard vertically. And because this is quite a thick tassel, I will wrap this yarn 100 times. And then once I have my 100 wraps, I'm going to just take that horizontal piece of yarn that I had put on there first and just tie that off at the top to hold the tassel together. And then once I have a nice knot there at the top, I'll just go ahead with some scissors and cut the bottom of the yarn to remove it from the cardboard. To make that thick band at the top, I'm going to take another piece of yarn and just wrap that around about 10 times before tying it off, just to create that nice thicker kind of band there at the top of the tassel. To attach the tassel to the pillow, I'm going to sew it on using that big honkin' needle. You know, that one that's in your needle box and you're saying, what will I use that for? Something like this would be a good choice. So I'm just going to sew it on, and I'm just going through the material and then through the top of the tassel, back and forth. I did maybe about 15 times, and then I'll just take it around the back and do some lock stitches to just hold that in place. Just bring the needle through the back and then the needle through the thread as well. And then I just went back and cut off that excess yarn at the top of the tassel, which originally held it together. And here you can also see the back of the pillow and how nice that looks with more texture, less shag. This is about the time that I realized that that piece was too wide. And here you can see what I mean next to the original. That middle piece should have been about 1.5 inches to 2 inches less wide. And I'm sitting there all week because this was the first project I did, and it's making me crazy. And I'm like, okay, should I jack with the pillow and, risk messing it up, or should I just leave well enough alone? But of course, since I'm crazy obsessed, I did. And then here you can see take 2 of this project, where I did try to lessen the width of that center piece. Not very well. It was a hot mess. I had to cut the glue out. I couldn't get the strip straight. Yes, not advisable. However, I do think it looks much better. I would just suggest to do it right the first time. And now kicking off the top 10 is a modern candle holder. This one comes from Antropologie and also has a fancy French name, which must account for why it's so unbelievably expensive. Okay, this is going to be a messy one. So, fair warning, pull those sleeves up and get those gloves on. I'm going to start with this Dollar Tree vase. Now, these come in all different colors. I did wipe it down with some vinegar, and now I'm going to just spray paint it with some of this ultra matte black spray paint. Next, I took a whole big bunch of this cotton twine from the Dollar Tree, and I'm going to place it in some of this wood stain in the color Gunstock. I just placed it there in a jar and then just stuck the cotton twine inside and kind of squished it all around, wringed it out, and just make sure that all of the twine is being covered by the stain. Now, when I opened it up there, I could see there was still some white there in the middle, so I did go back and add a little more stain, again, just kind of squishing it through, making sure that I get all of the twine covered in the stain. Then once I'm sure everything's covered, I just want to take the twine back out, and now I'm kind of just removing the excess. So as I roll it back up around my fingers, I'm pulling the string as I'm doing that, and that's taking off the excess stain off of the twine. And yes, I was getting stain everywhere, as you can see, so make sure that your surface is covered. But that's okay, because I'll also be using this Dollar Tree wood box with the drawer, and I just want to stain that as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and lap up that stain right off the surface and stain the box. Next, I'm going to be going back to my vase that has been painted now, and I'm going to just brush on some glue. Now, I'm using this Titebond Quick and Thick, but you can use any craft glue like tacky glue or even regular glue. You can let it air dry a little bit so that it's a little bit thicker. And then I'm going to just start attaching my twine, and I'm going to just add that there to the bottom and just wind it around the vase, adding more glue as I go. And again, this is one messy project, but you know, it's good. It's good to get in there, make a mess, color outside the lines, you know, leave caution to the wind. Just make sure you have gloves and surfaces covered that you don't want to get all that messed up. And then you'll see how I just kind of continue to go along, and as the glue pops up in between the string, I just kind of, you know, smooth it out on top of the string, and then just bring it up there to the top, ending it off, and just kind of squishing it there into the glue and finishing off that top piece. And then I just kind of went back because everything was kind of, you know, popping up in between the strings, like I said before, and just kind of smoothed it all out to make sure I had a nice and even finish. And then once it was dry, this is what it looked like. And you can see how the string mimics the carved lines of the original, but I did have a problem. The string had soaked up more of the stain and made it darker than the box. Now, I could have played with some more of the stain, but I opted to just use some brown craft paint that I diluted pretty thin, creating almost a stain with the brown craft paint. And then I just kind of painted that over. Now you'll see where it does come up close to that same color of the vase, but right here it's still wet, but because it is so thin, it will still dry, and you still will be able to see the lines of the wood grain underneath. Now somehow I lost the footage of the next steps, but it's easy because all I did was took some black multi-surface paint and gave a fresh coat of black paint there to the top, and then I took the two pieces and glued them together with some E6000 glue, and then I just did a coat of varnish all over the entire piece. And then here you can see the two pieces, the original and the Dollar Dupe, side by side. The Dollar Dupe did come out a little bit darker. We had to make that adjustment for the extra saturation of the stain, but all in all, I think it came out pretty good. Coming in at number 9 is a paper mache bowl. This was a dupe of a restoration hardware piece that retails there at the store for $195. For this project, I'm again going to be using the large plastic serving bowl from the Dollar Tree. I'm also going to use some of this Dollar Tree toilet paper, and it is 2-ply that comes apart very easily, and I'm going to just separate it by squares. I'm then also going to remove some of the edges of those squares, so I'm just going to pull them together and then just kind of roughly take off the edges and create a little pile there so that I have a whole bunch ready to use. And I'll be attaching the toilet paper pieces to the bowl with some diluted school glue. Now, this one is actually too thin, but I'll show you that in a second. But I also wanted to show you that for the base, for the little bottom piece of the bowl, I'm going to be using the lid off of this nut jar. And I'll just put that aside for now. And then I'm going to go back to the bowl and just begin applying the glue right to the side of the bowl. And then just apply the little pieces of toilet paper right on top. And just kind of fold them over the lip of the bowl and continue to go down all the way around the bowl. Now, why I'm saying it's too thin, that glue, is that I needed it to be thin so that it breaks down the paper fibers, but it's too thin, and so it was tearing the paper, and so I had to go back and add some more glue, and the consistency you see there is the better consistency for this method of doing paper mache. Now, I know there's all types of paper mache methods out there where you put the glue and you mix it with a mixer and you actually use the bowl just as a mold and all that good stuff. Yeah, this is FabTax. We're going to do it as easy as possible. Just go ahead and use the bowl from the Dollar Tree, and it's going to stay on there, and just go ahead and glue the pieces right on to the bowl itself. And then in order to make it easier to do this project and not have to hold the bowl, I just took the nut container that I'm using the lid from and placed the bowl on top of that. And then that just created a nice little work stand for me to just keep the bowl on top of. And then I'm just able to use both hands and just apply the papers much more easily. And then once I had completed the first layer, I just went back with a second layer. And all I needed to do was just put them right onto the bowl. I didn't have to put any more glue because the first layer glue was still wet and coming through the sides there. So I just needed to add that second layer and just press it right down into the glue and the first layer of paper. And then after all of the glue pieces were applied, I did go back with a second coat of the glue mixture. But if the paper starts tearing and you're having some trouble with that, just let that layer dry completely before going back and adding that second layer of glue. And then here is what the bowl looks like after the second layer of paper has been applied and that glue has dried. And I also did the inside of the bowl. Now the original also has this strip that goes around as well as a wider rim. To get the wider rim, I just painted the glue mixture right at the inside top of the bowl. Then I took a square of the toilet paper, attached it there, also painted along the rim itself, and began folding the piece of toilet paper like an accordion kind of, and then just brought that around and glued the outside top of the bowl, and then just kind of shaped it into place. For the strip, I took a piece of toilet paper, I did leave it 2-ply, and just rolled it up, and then just kind of formed it around, and then took some of the glue mixture and applied it there in the space where it would go on the bowl. And then I simply just attached the rolled up piece of the toilet paper. For the base, I just took that cap from the nut container, which I had covered with toilet paper, and then just glued that with some E6000 right onto the base. Next, I'm going to just paint the whole piece with some hazelnut Waverly chalk paint. But then, since I'm running low on my hazelnut, I did remember I had this paint sample mist tint from Lowe's that I picked up for $1.25, very similar in color to the hazelnut, so I just went ahead and used that. For the accent paint, I took some white chalk paint that I toned down again with some of this hazelnut-ish color, and I don't want that stark contrast, so this just helps me to tone it down a little bit and softens the white so that it's not as sharp, that contrast. And so I'm just going ahead and applying the lighter color to the surface of the bowl, and I'm just kind of hitting the spots where the paper mache kind of raises up, and it just kind of gives that overcoat while still allowing the base coat to shine through. And like the other piece, it is also heavier in some spots, the accent coating, and lighter in others. So I'm just going through and just adding it lightly to the top, on top of the paper mache, but also heavier in some spots and lighter in others. For the darker accent shades, I'm going to use what I had left over from the last project, as well as some of this brown craft paint. And I'm going to start with the brown craft paint. I'm going to just use, again, a makeup sponge. I'm going to remove the better portion of the paint because I don't want to go too heavy. I want to make sure that, I can control how much paint is going onto the surface. And I'm going to just pretty much follow the original to see where the dark shading is and where these little accents and little divots and scrapes are on the original piece. And they're coming in pretty much there along the base as well as the little strip and along the top, and some scattered spots in between as well. So in addition to that, there is also a nice kind of ruddy shading. And in order to get that effect, I pretty much removed most of that brown paint from the sponge and then just use pretty much a dry sponge to go in and just kind of shade very lightly, kind of blush the surface and rub it in to really just kind of mute it out. I don't want any like thick colors, just very muted, very soft tones. And then I finished up with refining the accent paint along the edges and base. And first I started with that really dark color. And I'm just kind of splotching it along using this kind of wonky paintbrush that I had. And again, just doing that, kind of just pouncing it along there on the edges and along the base. Then the next one I did was mineral, once that paint was dry, so every time the paint needs to dry. And then this time I switched back to my Dollar Tree chip brush. And I am loading this up pretty good. I want to just make sure I'm kind of getting some off, but I also want it fully loaded, if that makes any sense. So I don't want just some of the bristles to have paint on it. I want a full load, but not an extraordinary amount. And then I'm kind of just doing this one-time pounce and just moving the brush, then I'm going to reload it again and do the same thing. Now I'll also do this with that lighter brown color, and unfortunately that was not caught on film, but I do three different types of paint for these edges, and it is the dark shade and then that mineral and then also that chocolate brown color shown earlier. And I'm applying them in the same method where I load the brush up, pounce, and move on. And then here you can see the finished project next to the original. And as you can see, they are pretty similar in size. And actually the Dollar Dupe looks more paper mache-y than the original. The original looks like it's stone or cement or something. But either way, you can certainly get that look for a lot less.
Coming in at number 8 is a tray top storage table. This storage table actually started out life as a planter dupe, and it did make a really nice planter. However, I quickly discovered that I could create a storage table by putting a charger on top, which would also turn the basket into a storage area. To make, I took a Dollar Tree basket and storage bin and the handles from 4 Dollar Tree shovels and painted them with black spray paint. I then zip tied the handles to the inside corners of the storage bin and used some E6000 glue to attach the bin to the basket. From here you can add the topper of your choice, and chargers make a great fit, like this one here from Dollar Tree and another one here from Dollar Tree, and also the Dollar Tree pizza pan painted black also makes a great topper. I chose to use a wood tray from Magnolia that I already had on hand and that perfectly fit my decor. Number 7, the copper-footed planter, is another quick and easy project. To make, I took this adorable Easter basket from the Dollar Tree, and I particularly loved it because of the filigree design as well as the embossed accents around the rim and base. I also picked up a pack of these Easter stampers, and I'll use 4 of those as legs for the planter, and then I'll use some E6000 glue to attach them to the bottom of the basket. Next, I'll paint the entire piece with some copper spray paint. And then after painting with the spray paint, I'm going to go back in and highlight a little bit with some craft paint, especially around the raised portions there around the rim. I'm using some black craft paint to highlight there, and then also there around the little feet to give that a little accenting as well. And then here is the before and after, quite a difference from its starting point. And again, just a very simple, easy little project, and seriously one of my favorite pots that I have. I use it all the time and I just love it. Moving on to number 6, we go into more complicated projects again with the standing sculpture RH Dupes. I just love the textures and colors of these hand-carved wood panels from Restoration Hardware. The price, on the other hand, is definitely out of my ballpark. So let's see what we can do with some Dollar Tree items. To start, I'm going to use this shipping box from the Dollar Tree. Now, you can use any cardboard that you like. I just happened to be in Dollar Tree and saw these and couldn't believe how much they were in the size proportion that was needed for this project. So I went ahead and picked one of these up, and now I'm going to just cut it into the 4 pieces, or the 4 sides down into pieces. And then for the smaller ones, I'm actually going to cut those a little bit shorter. I'm going to measure down 12 inches and then mark there and then just cut across. So at this stage, I had 2 pieces 14 by 10 inches and 2 pieces that were 12 by 8 inches. My next step was to tape the 2 pieces together, or the 2 pieces that were the same size together. And so I'm just going to use some masking tape and just go ahead and tape those together on 3 sides, leaving the bottom side open. And then I'll repeat that for the larger pieces of cardboard. Once the taping is complete, I'm going to go ahead with some Mod Podge and paint the back and front of both pieces. Once the Mod Podge was dry, it was time to apply caulk to the surface. I'm only going to be applying caulk to the one side, but it does require 2 tubes of the Dollar Tree caulk for the small one and 3 tubes for the larger one. Once I had a good amount of the caulk onto the surface, I just took my spreader again and spread the caulk all over the front of the panel. And then once I had applied a nice even coat of the caulk, I went back again with some water on my fingertips and just smoothed out the surface. To create the first design on the panel, I'm going to go back to the comb from the first DIY in this video and just go ahead and create a little feathering effect at the top and bottom of the panel. Now this is the small panel that I'm working on first, and I'm just again using this comb to create a little feathering at the top and bottom. Then I'm going to go back with this shim and a little piece of wood and go ahead and create the lines that go across the shorter panel. And I'm just doing this by sight and kind of just eyeballing it and then just using that shim to create the pattern in the caulk. To give the raised lines a little texture, I'm going back with the skinny side of the shim and just kind of adding some design there to the top of the lines. And then for the larger panel, I'm again going to be doing that feather design with the comb, but this time I'm going to be doing it to the sides of the panel. And you'll notice how I did it here and then also in the first one where I kind of just pressed it in. But then you'll see right here, I did figure out a better way to do it where I'm actually pulling the comb and creating a much better design. I did go back and fix the first one as well. But this is a much better way to get that feathering effect on the sides of the panels. To create the design on this panel, I took a hair pick and cut off every other prong. And then I just used that to pull down through the caulk and create the design. The larger panel also has horizontal lines, and I just again used the pick to create those. I noticed that the smaller panel also had some vertical lines and went back with the back of the comb and just created those on that panel as well. To create the stand, I'm going to use one of these cat scratch boards from the Dollar Tree, and I'm going to measure down 7 inches and draw a line there, and then just use this paint stick here to cut down with my utility knife. At the end, I'll have one 7-inch piece and one 8.5 inch. I then took some masking tape and taped off around all the edges. For the poles, I'm going to use 2 of the large barbecue skewers from Dollar Tree, and I'm going to measure those down with my tape measure, 17 inches, and I'm going to mark and cut there. I'll also cut off those pointy ends because they are sharp. And then I broke out the caulk again, and so I just placed it there on top of the cat scratch board and used my spreader to spread it along the top, as well as kind of push it into all those little crevices there on the board. I also did around the sides of the board, and I also want to point out that it's important to use the Dollar Tree brand caulk. I had run out of it and used some caulk that I had in my garage. Now, I don't know what the difference is, but the other one, the one from Home Depot, it was very flexible, and so it did not create a good hold for the poles. However, the Dollar Tree brand dried hard as a rock, and it created a great base. Another thing you need to do is make sure that the holes are really small, don't make too large of a hole, and that you get a lot of caulk inside the hole as well. And then let everything dry overnight, and it's going to create a great base for your project.
And of course, you could always just use a piece of wood for the base and drill holes in the bottom. I was simply trying to use as much Dollar Tree products and come up with ideas for Dollar Tree products, which is why I used this method instead.
And then once the caulk was dry on my panels, it was time to paint. And so I wanted to create a base coat in kind of a terracotta color. So I took truffle and pumpkin Waverly chalk paints and just mixed them together to create that darker orange shade. And then I just proceeded to paint both panels with a base coat of this color paint. I used the paintbrush to make sure that I got into all the little crevices in between the lines. And since the caulk was set on my stands, I took those out back for a coat of black spray paint. For the accent paint for my panels, I'm going to take some white chalk paint and then also some hazelnut colored chalk paint and mix the two together. It's about a 3/4 to 1/4 ratio. I then took that paint and added it to about the same amount of spackle to add some texture to my top coat. I started first with the smaller panel, again just following the design of the original. Now, the original has this kind of lighter shading in the upper left-hand corner, and then again in the right-hand corner, and then kind of lighter in the middle, or less in the middle. And even when you're looking at it, it's not going to look like it's white like this or a light color on top. There'll be shades in between, and we'll get to that in a minute. But first, I'm going to do this layer, and then we'll see how I shade on top of this. Next, I'll start on the larger panel, again following the original's design. And also, I'm going to be shading on top of this, but I need to get this layer of lighter colored paint on first. And then once that lighter paint was dry, I did go back with the darker shading, and I'm again using that dark paint from the second project, actually, now that I've been using for an accent paint. And I'm just going in for this first piece into those horizontal lines and then adding some other dark accents around in the different areas, again just following the original piece. Then I switched over to the makeup sponge, and I'm doing shading using both that darker shade that I was just using on this piece, as well as the kind of chocolate bar brown color that I was using on the paper mache bowl. And that's when I'm just going in and using the sponge to do just a very dry brush, just kind of a smudge effect, using both of those paint colors and just shading and shadowing in, following the design of the original piece, and just using those colors to blend and shadow and shade to create this kind of wood effect. And now turning back to the smaller piece, again, just using that chocolate brown color, very little on the sponge. I'm using the square end of the sponge and going back over that lighter color paint, again, just shadowing and shading, very similar to what the original piece has. I'm also using that darker colored paint to again mimic the spots where those darker shades are showing up on the original piece, and again just using very little paint. I can go back and add more if needed, but I just want to get that shading and kind of just blushing and rubbing that paint in very lightly at first, just acquiring slowly that whole effect and making sure I'm not going too heavy in any spots, because you want to keep that dimension of the multicolors coming through. And then once the paint was dry, I was able to now put my panel on the stand. And so here it is after it's been painted with the black spray paint. And all you need to do is just slide your posts right into the pocket of your panel, and it will hold it just beautifully. Except for the fact that that stand was way too wobbly. So I wanted to add some reinforcements. And what I did was I took these little building blocks. They're from the Dollar Tree. You get them in the teaching section. And so I put 2 of these together. They come as like just little pieces. They're colorful. They have a couple black ones, but there's only a couple in a package. And what I'm going to do is take 2 of the pieces, clip them together. I did add some E6000 there first to create an extra strong bond. And then I also did some E6000 in the hole and then around the outside of the hole, and then placed the little building block pair down inside the hole. Then I'm going to add some of the caulk, and then I'll replace my stick inside of that. And then once the glue and caulk are set, I will go ahead and touch these up with some black paint. And then here you can see the finished project next to the original. And now, of course, our dollar dupe's going to have that little extra bonus piece down there at the bottom. And it is about 1/3 smaller in size than the original. But it does give that great restoration hardware vibe, especially if you have RH taste on a DT budget.
Coming in at number 5 is what I like to call the pom-pom vase, but it is better known as Anthropologie's Minka vase. If you saw my vintage Christmas video, you may have seen how I abandoned this Goodwill glass canister for a taller, skinnier canister to make a vintage lantern, but I'm happy to say that today is this canister's day to shine. And its co-stars are going to be some adhesive pearl wrap from the Dollar Tree, as well as a Dollar Tree mop head and some Dollar Tree pom-poms. I'm going to also make sure this canister is nice and clean and wipe it down with some vinegar to prep the surface. Next, I'm going to cut the adhesive wrap into strips, and I'm going to cut the strips 4 rows wide. So I'm going to count 4 rows of pearls and then cut, and then count another 4 rows and then cut. And then once I have my strips cut, I'm going to just go ahead and apply them right to the side of the canister. I'm going to start the first row there, right below the lip of the canister. Just apply it there to the side, and then I'll take a second strip and start that one where the first one left off, just lining up those pearls, bringing it around to where the end is, and then cut it off in that spot. Next, I'm going to take some of my Type Bond glue, and I do get that at Lowe's. I believe Home Depot also sells. And I'll just put a strip there at the bottom of the pearls, and then use that to attach one of the mop strands, and I'll just pull that all the way around the outside of the canister. Then I'll adhere another strip of pearls, and then just alternate that pattern, pearls, mop strands, all the way down the canister. And then once it's finished, it'll look something like this. And then the next step will be to paint the surface. And to paint, I'm going to use one of my favorite combinations, which is spackle and paint. And I'm going to do this in a 1-to-1 ratio. So I'm just going to take some of that Dollar Tree spackle, put it into a little
Cool Whip container here, and then add the paint in equal measure. Do you want it to be, one of the thinner sides? When I use this paint, I usually will use it in different combinations, but this one's going to be a 1-to-1 ratio. And then it's thin enough for me to get into all those little nooks and crannies. I'm also paying special attention to get it inside where the string is, where the mop string is, so that it is in those little crevices all the way around. And then I'll just finish up the top, painting a couple coats of the paint there all around the lip. And then once my first coat had dried, I did go back and add a second coat of the paint all over the surface. And now it's time to get messy again. So what I want to do here is add the little pom-poms. And I did go ahead and pre-mark the spaces so I don't have them, bumping on top of each other. When I get to the other side, I'm going to use the little pom-poms, and now I'm going to dip them right into the paint and just kind of squish them around and wring them out. And then I'm going to just add a little bit of glue there to the spot that I marked, and then add my messy little pom-pom. And I'm going to go ahead and continue to do this all the way. I'm going to do probably about 3 or 4 rows here. And then I'll start going down from there because these are wet and they're going to need to dry on each side. So what I'll do is I'll create one section, let it dry, and then move on to the other sections after that. And then here you can see that first section where I applied the pom-poms all the way down. And so I'm going to let that dry before moving on to the next sections. And then here it is, about 3/4 of the way done. Now I just wanted to point out that I did go ahead and add a top row there up by the lip. When I looked at the original, it did go all the way up to the top, so I don't know what I was thinking. But you see I have a little bit more to finish there, but I'm going to continue adding that top row. And now here it is next to the original. However, the photo is a little flat, so it's not really giving you a great idea of the texture. However, you could see that in the film footage previously that the texture really did come out nice. And I have to say, that poor abandoned canister is looking pretty good. Take that, you tall, skinny canister that ran off with her lid nonetheless. Because I kind of had to use it because I already was doing the DIY and I already finished that part. And anyway, she's looking good.
In the number 4 spot, we have a round teakwood mirror. This is a dupe of the Pottery Barn Jules mirror. And if I had to guess, this would probably be number 1 on many of your lists, as it is definitely a viewer favorite.
For this project, I'm going to start with some wood clothespins from the Dollar Tree. Now, I did have to break into a second pack, so you will need 2 packs for this project. And I'm going to be staining them with some Minwax stain in the color Special Walnut. And I'm going to stain all of the clothespins, everything included in this pack of 36. Plus, I think there was an additional maybe 10 more. And then I'm going to make sure I'm getting into all the little nooks and crannies, especially where there clips on the bottom, where I'm painting right now. That's the spot that is going to be visible. The other parts really aren't going to be visible, but I am staining them just because if you're looking at the mirror from the side, you'll see the raw, naked clothespin in behind. So I want to make sure that I'm staining the entire clothespin. Next, I'm going to take one of these Dollar Tree mirrors. Now, the ones that they have in store now are larger than the ones that they've had in the past, and they are held on by these kind of plastic clips. And kind of have to break the clip in order to get the mirror out, but that's okay because we're not putting it back in. But this one is a little larger than the ones that they have had in the past. And what I want to do here is just clip the clothespins onto the edge of the mirror. Now, I do want to use a little E6000 glue to try to keep them in place a little bit, glue them on. And so I'm just adding a little E6000 there to the tip before clipping them onto the edge of the mirror. And then I just continued placing the clothespins around the mirror. And this is where one pack got me to. And then I had to go and stain some more and add the rest. It's probably about 12 more that I had to add there. And then once all of the clothespins were in place, I just made sure that all of the pieces were kind of in line and in place. Next, I took a 3-foot piece of balsa wood. You can get these at the craft stores. And with the coupons, it comes in about $2, $2.50. And so this is the 1/8 inch size. And so all I'm going to do with this is first I want to kind of distress it. So I'm going to use this melon baller to kind of just make dings or like kind of indentations and then also some scrapes. But you can use this or any tool. I can also just use a scissors. So if I take my scissors and I just take the handle and just kind of use that to dent, and then also to use the blade to scrape along, just any way that you can to create a little distressing into the wood. Next, I took a ruler and measured 3-inch lengths, and then I just drew lines across and cut there. Now the neat thing about balsa wood, if you have never used it before, is that it cuts like with the scissors. It's fantastic. So I just cut these little 3-inch squares of the balsa wood that I had distressed, and then next I wanted to cut the wood into kind of flower petal type shapes, and so I needed them to be different sizes, and so I needed one set of the petals to be 5 centimeters on the top, 3 centimeters on the bottom, 4 and 2, and then 2 and 1. And so in order to do those, I took one of my squares, and then I took the ruler and just measured across 5 centimeters, and then just cut it there, creating 2 pieces now. And that other piece I will keep, the smaller piece I will keep for my 2 centimeter, 1 centimeter petals, but for this one where I'm trying to create the 5 centimeter, 3 centimeter petal, I'm going to go ahead and take my ruler and just place it there kind of in the center of the piece on the bottom so that I can get my 3 centimeter length kind of centered there. And so I'll mark off the one end and then the other with the pencil. So that's that 3 centimeter length there in the middle. And then again, I'm going to just use some scissors to cut from that point to the upper corner on each side. And then just round it off on the top by snipping those corners on the end. And then this will create a template that I can use to trace and then just cut the other squares in that shape. And then on that other side that has a remainder I can use for the smaller pieces. And then once all my pieces are cut, I'm going to dry fit them onto my mirror frame first before I glue them on. And so the pieces that are the largest pieces, those are the 3 centimeter pieces, and the clothespins are 1 centimeter wide. So you can typically get one of the larger pieces to go across 3 of the clothespins. The middle ones go across 2 of the clothespins, and then the small ones are a single clothespin. And you can kind of just shape them around using the different sizes. That creates that nice rustic look when you have these different sizes. But as you go, you're going to need to kind of trim here and there to get the pieces to fit together well. And then you can also cut pieces to fit in where there are gaps, or even just when there's little splinters that kind of come from your cut pieces, you can kind of just glue those in to piece everything together. And then once you have everything dry fit, you can go back with some wood glue and just glue all your pieces to the clothespin. And don't worry about putting in those little pieces because, don't worry about lining it up so perfectly that there might be gaps or gashes, because remember, the more distressed, the more it's going to look like the original, and the more that the stain that we're going to put on top now is going to soak into those little crevices and really give you a lot of great dimension and detail. And then once all your pieces are attached, it's ready for the top stain. And so I'm going to just go back with that Minwax stain again in color Special Walnut and just paint all of the wood on top. I'm going to make sure I get all around the edges and in between in all the little crevices, and then also down in where the wood and the clothespins touch the mirror. I want to make sure that I get in along that front there so that the stain is covering all of the pieces of the wood. And then here's what it looks like after the stain has been applied, and you can see how all those little gashes and nicks and gaps have created a lot of variation in the color, and it just gives a lot of great character and dimension to the piece. And then once the stain was dry, I went back with my very most favorite polyurethane, this Rust-Oleum triple thick in a clear satin. The original piece does have a rather thick coat, almost like a resin coating to the top of the wood. So this triple thick stain is really ideal for this project. And I will be doing this one coat, and then I will add a second coat on top of that. I also wanted to mention at this time that this is a smaller mirror than the original, much smaller mirror. And if you did want to get a larger mirror from Michael's or Hobby Lobby, you can get those for like $6 or $7, and that will get you much closer to the size of this project, of the original. But you could just use the exact same technique, just on a larger frame a larger mirror. And then this way you're going to get a product, a result that's going to be much more similar in size to the original mirror than this one here from the Dollar Tree mirror. And here you can see the finished project next to the original. And although it is a much smaller mirror, it still does give you that same vibe. And you can see how using the same technique with a larger mirror will get you pretty close to the original. Plus, a larger mirror would also give you a better wood to mirror ratio. This one's a little bit askew, but you can pick up a 14-inch mirror from Michael's for about $6, which will result in a fairly large 21-inch finished project, and for a lot less for the price. And then rounding out the top three, we have the long bead centerpiece. My next DIY is something I've been wanting to do for a long time, and that is to create a centerpiece for my patio table. And so if you see here, I have 2 packs of the large paint stirrers. I also have a selection of recycled bottles, and then also a couple packs. I actually use 3 packs of the Dollar Tree beads, and then some skewers and also some craft sticks and some paint. I have some white and some cashew chalk paint. I did not end up using the hazelnut. I just used those other 2 colors. Now I have to point out that this is a very large piece. You can see here how it is with the 2 sets of the large paint sticks back to back. It does extend quite long. So if you are not up for building an arc and you just want something on a smaller scale, of course you can use the smaller paint sticks or maybe some craft sticks and accomplish the same look. So the first step was to glue the paint sticks together. And I did that using this Tight Bond glue, but you can use Gorilla Glue or a wood glue would work just as fine. And then I took some popsicle sticks and I glued those across the paint sticks. And I did that about every inch, inch and a half until I got to that last 3.5 inches there at the bottom. I did leave that blank because I'm going to use those for the larger craft sticks. But I did do both sides of the tray. And now I'm going to just apply these larger craft sticks to the center and do those horizontally. Next, I took some of the Dollar Tree wood craft cubes and created little feet at the bottom of my tray with those. So for my first set of cubes, I applied those to each end of the first popsicle stick. Counted 3 popsicle sticks and added another set of cubes, 3 popsicle sticks, and then another set of cubes. And then I'm going to do the same to the other side. And here you can see what it looks like with all the little cubes applied. So it's 1 set, 3 popsicle sticks, 1 set, 3 popsicle sticks. So now I'll just leave this to dry, and then I'm going to head on over to my bottles. I'm going to soak those and remove the labels. I'm also going to start working on my bead border. And all I did to make that was to take one of the Dollar Tree skewers. I'm going to remove that top. I did like impale myself with those multiple times. It really hurts. They're very pointy. So be sure to remove the very point of that skewer. And then I actually started on the other end. But what I found was that I added a little glue, and then I started adding some of the beads. And then invariably, one of the beads was really tight. So then I made that one the bottom piece to really hold those in place. And then I proceeded to add the rest through the pointy tip, which is how I came to discover how pointy those tips are. But anyhow, once they were all done, I put them into a styrofoam block and then just took them outside and sprayed them with some white spray paint. To do the faux finish, I did a kind of a reversal switcheroo. So here, this is this beautiful natural wood on these paint sticks, and it's very similar to this color of chalk paint called cashew. And because of all the different colors of the beads, I didn't want that on this tray. I painted them white, and then I'm going to faux finish them with the cashew. And I'm going to take the white chalk paint, and I'm going to faux finish the natural or cashew colored paint sticks with the white. So first I'll start with the paint stick tray, and I'm going to go ahead with some white chalk paint. I did dilute this a little bit so it is a little bit more runny, and then I just proceeded to dry brush the white kind of diluted chalk paint onto the wood. And now this is going to just give that great like natural beachy kind of whitewashed look or bleached out look to this wood. And so I'm doing this with a very dry brush, and I'm doing it just a little bit at a time because I want to make sure that I get it right to that right point where I want it to be. And I don't want to go too heavy with the paint because then I might pass that point and then be sorry. So this way I just go a little bit at a time and I can get it exactly how I want it to go. Now I'm going to do a reverse of that for the faux finish on the beads. So I'm going to take the white paint stick and now I'm going to dry brush on the cashew color. And so you can see as I'm doing that, how well that begins to match the wood of the tray. So in effect, that they both have both colors with streaks of the other. And it's just kind of which came first, the chicken or the egg, the white or the cashew. So in this case, you won't be able to tell once both pieces are finished. And then once the beads were completed, I just went and attached those to the edges of the tray using some of that Type Bond glue, but you could also use some wood glue or Gorilla Glue. Even hot glue would work here. And I'm just going to kind of place them and then kind of make sure that they're straight, because if they moved around on the skewer, I want to make sure they're in the same position. And then also I need to cut this edge of the skewer off. Forgot to do that. And you'll notice too that because these are painted beads, there might be some gapping where the bead has shifted from when it was painted on the skewer. And so I just went back afterwards and did do some little touch-up paint here and there to cover some of those spots. And then I just cut a smaller piece to go across the top, and then I did this all the way around the tray, creating a nice bead border. And now here you can see the finished project with all the beads attached and all the little touch-ups done. I've added the recycled bottles to the top along with some clippings from from bushes in my yard, and just stuck them in the bottles, created a little pattern, added some of the Dollar Tree votive candles as well. And for just a few dollars, you have something that looks like it came from Pottery Barn or West Elm or Crate and Barrel, and would probably cost $100 or more, especially for something this size.
And it's not just for outdoors and summer. I use it year-round, like here, to create a beautiful neutral Christmas centerpiece. Coming in at number 2 are the girl and boy vases. These were an H&M dupe, and I absolutely love, love, love them.
To make the girl vase, I'm going to be using these acrylic bowls from the party section of the Dollar Tree, and I'm going to just use some E6000 glue to glue the two pieces together. For the boy vase, I'm going to be using the small cylinder vase from Dollar Tree, and I'm also going to be using this Icebreakers Duo mint box for the base. Now what I really like about this mint box is that it opens, right? So you can glue the other part to the bottom of the vase and then use that for a secret hiding place. So I thought that was pretty cool. Now, if you don't have that type of container, you can use anything. The lid, even to the spackle container, would also make a great base. Next, I'm going to be painting the vases with a spackle paint mixture made of 1 part of chalk paint in the color plaster and 1 part of spackle, Dollar Tree spackle, and then I'll mix the two together and add a little water to make it nice and spreadable. And then I will paint both of the vases and the bases with this paint mixture, and I'll just do 1 coat. To make the face features, I'm going to use this air dry clay that I picked up at Dollar Tree in the craft section. I'm just going to be using a small amount. I'm going to roll it out into a kind of, I guess, log shape, and then just shape it around to create the lips. I'll just place that in place on the little girl first, ladies first, and then again another little log shape to create the bottom lip. You just kind of pinch those into place on the surface. And then I'll create another longer log, and now this one is going to create the eyebrow and nose features. And I'll just take a little teeny piece there to create the nose there at the bottom. Next, I took another small piece, rolled it out, and created that eyelid. And then another piece that was joined together to create a circle, and that's going to form the eye. And then I'll go ahead and form the same features on my boy vase, and then when that's complete, I'll set them both aside for the clay to dry. Once the clay is dry, I am going to move the pieces out of the way because they're not going to stick the way they are, so I need to glue those on. So I'm just using some E6000 glue, and what's nice is that it did leave a little outline where the features were, so I'm able to just put the glue in that space and then slide the features back into place so that they can be glued. And even if they break apart, it's fine. You can just, of course it's going to be glued, so you can just glue the pieces back together. And then once the glue is dry, I'll go back with my spackle paint. And you do want to make sure that it is nice and thin so it can get in between all those little cracks and crevices of the features. And I'm going to go ahead with 2 more coats of the spackle paint. And so this is what it looks like after 2 more coats of the spackle paint. But it does need still a little more paint, and I decided I did want to switch over to spray paint to give it a finer finish. And I did start out with that satin ivory, but then I remembered this chalked paint, spray paint, gives a really nice finish, very similar to the original, so I switched over to that one. And now here you can see the finished project next to the original. And while the dollar dupe is not as refined as the original, it is still a really fun project to do. And don't forget, if you use the mint container as the base for the boy vase, you do get a bonus secret hiding place. And now for my number 1 all-time personal favorite of Dollar Tree home decor DIYs that I made on this channel is number 1, candle stand. I just adore this piece, and although it was originally made as part of a fall decor video, it's actually a wonderful year-round piece. It can be changed out for different holidays or just left with greenery and enjoyed 365 days of the year. To make it, I'm going to be using this pie pan from the Dollar Tree, and I'm going to just give it a quick distressed galvanized finish. Now, how I'm going to do that is just by using a little gray craft paint, and the applicator I'm using is a piece of a plastic bag, regular plastic shopping bag. And so first I'll just go over with a darker shade gray, and then I'll go back with a lighter shade gray. And as you can see, it does do a pretty nice job of giving you a nice distressed galvanized finish. To create the stand, I'm going to be using a margarita glass from the Dollar Tree as well as a Dollar Tree votive holder. And I'm going to just E6000 the 2 pieces together. And then I'm going to use some of this spackle paint in a combination of 1/3 spackle to 2/3 of just regular craft paint. And then I'll mix it up till it's nice and smooth. And then before painting, I will prep the surface with some vinegar, just wiping it down, and then go ahead and apply the paint. While the stand is drying, I'm going to go ahead and create a little floral ring for my candle using these berry mix stems that I got from Walmart. And I'm going to just go all the way around the foam, putting the little cuttings of the sprigs in, and then I'm going to just glue that right to the bottom of my tray. And I'll just put on a candle to make sure that it holds in place. Plus, I'm going to actually use the lid in this craft and add some glue to the top of the foam, and then just place the lid on top of that, and then that'll create a nice level surface for my candle to sit on. Now here is my pedestal after it's been painted. Now I did paint this 3 times with that paint, but you can see where it creates a really great stand. And then I'll just put a little E6000 glue on the top of the pedestal and add my pie pan. And then here's another look at my very most favorite Dollar Tree DIY that I've done on this channel. Let me know whether or not you agree or what you would have ranked at number 1. Well, I hope you have enjoyed this retrospective look at the last 3.5 years of Dollar Tree DIYs on this channel. There is much more to come, so make sure you're subscribed and get ready for 2023.